Delta Lake in central New York. It's a great place to go paddling, catch a fish, take a swim, you name it. It wasn't always like this, though. It's a man-made lake, and there used to be a village underneath these waters. But it exists now only as a memory. My goal with this video and local New York history series is to keep memories like this alive, and in this case, give you an idea of the full 125-year span of this small community. In a lot of ways, it represents a time and place that no longer exists. And thinking about it sort of gives you a sense of nostalgia. I mean, this was a place where people knew their neighbors and supported each other through hard times, where children went to school and got a good education. People came together in the good times and the bad, and were proud of their community. We are so lucky, by the way, that we have pictures of it. And I don't mean just for the record, but just to show that history is not a collection of dates and facts, but rather it's a story of people. People and their lives. With that said, pictures can only go so far. We'll never really know what it was like to see the Mohawk River flowing through the village, or to fish over in Beaver Brook and catch dinner. How about listening to the good old town band, or attending a party on Elmer Hill? I wonder what it was like to stay at the Empire Hotel, or hang out at the Village Green. Or maybe even hear children playing by the nearby river. We can't know what it was really like to hear a sermon given by the local Reverend J.M. Thomas. For all of that, we'll just have to use our imaginations. In the meantime, though, I want to go over the full story of Delta. And it begins right after the American Revolution. A new country was born, and a soldier named Roswell Fellows goes north of Fort Stanwix and picks a spot to call home. He basically just went north up into the woods, and he picked a great spot because the fertile farmlands were great to grow crops on, which was all the rage back in the day. So people started coming. In the spring of 88, that's 1788, you got David Hicks, Reuben Beckwith, and Henry Wager. And then you get the Sheldon brothers and David Smith, who comes and builds a sawmill. And this is important because it would help build new homes and stores. You also have people like Hezekiah Elmer, who builds what he calls the blockhouse. And his name was put on the hill on which it stood. It's still there. The name, that is. The place was up and coming. In the early 1800s, you got Prosper E. Rudd establishing a grist mill to ground grains, and Israel Stark planning the village, which at the time he's calling it Union Valley. The basic layout of Delta was a main street near a bend in the Mohawk River, and the central road to town coming from Elmer Hill. What's cool about the village is that it's basically right in between Rome, Lee, and Western. But people could not decide on a name, and things were getting heated. We were this close to Delta Lake being called Lake Hollow. But luckily, Captain Gates Peck came in and said, "Hey everyone, doesn't it just look like a big letter D? Let's call it Delta." And everyone listened. And with an official name in place, you have other things that a community needs, like a post office and a church. You got the Methodist Episcopal. For education, one of the first teachers was Lorene Rudd. And then there's the story of William V. Evans. He used to place a large iron kettle on the hill behind his house, and travelers would stop to give their horses a drink. Originally, this hill was called Pettibone Hill, but from then on, it was Kettle Hill. Around this time, there were also several homes that served as stations on the Underground Railroad. For a while, it was farm country, but by this time, shops and businesses are popping up to the left and to the right. You got the Black River House and, of course, the Empire Hotel, which was owned and operated by Herbert Kane and his wife. And outside there, you might find someone like Jake Ritter, who'd happily take you to Rome if you wanted. Another popular person was Dr. Johnson Pillmore, who saw many locals into the world and sat by the bedside of many who left. His wife, Mary June Utley, was a trained nurse, and together they made a great medical team. During this era, two of my great-great-grandfathers, George B. Onley and C. Frank Floyd, remodeled some buildings, and established Only in Floyd, a company that canned corn, apples, and various vegetables. I exist because the son of one married the daughter of the other, and these are my Grandpa Jack Only's parents. At the factory, they made their own tin cans, and at the time, this common practice was revolutionizing food packaging. The labels on these cans started out as simple information, but they ended up evolving into these colorful designs, trying to connect with customers and creating brand recognition. But Only in Floyd wasn't the only factory in town. The Industrial Revolution was a-boomin', and you also have the Mohawk Valley Canning Factory, the second oldest cheese factory in the United States, and more. But all of this prosperity was short-lived. We know the ending of this movie. Because in the early 1900s, the idea of a new barge canal, a sort of successor to the Erie Canal, was the result of a committee formed in 1899 by the governor of New York, Theodore Roosevelt. More on him in the next video, but the point is, a more reliable source of water was required for the canal, and Delta gets the short end of the stick. A dam was to be built to hold a reservoir, and construction begins in 1908. Residents of Delta were forced to accept compensation for their land and leave their homes. This was not a small task. It required the removal of something like 295 buildings, including 2 cemeteries and a bunch of private burial plots. To build the dam, steam power was essential, but after much toil and tears, the last bucketful of concrete was poured on January 18th, 1912. The result was a beautiful dam that's still there, and 3 locks next to it that are not still there. It was very impressive for its time, and it still is. Soon after, people would come from all over the area and just look at it. And after it was built, slowly but surely, the surrounding farmland began to flood, and people watched as the village of Delta becomes Delta Lake. People moved on with their lives, and fast forward to 1950 when the idea of a state park was suggested, and in 1968 the Delta Lake State Park was first opened to the public. A lot's changed since Delta was flooded, but there's still echoes of it even today. Look no further than Westernville, where its town hall is the relocated Empire Hotel, and houses like my great-grandfather's were built out of materials from Delta. It's not about the materials, though. There is no one alive today from the original village. Even so, we can still learn from their lives and see the importance of community and just simply being good to one another. With that in mind, let's make some new memories. Because who knows, maybe one day people will remember us too. Have a good one.